when you hate to see
your old TV.
really feel the music with the Sony Walkman.
The Sony Walkman.
Remember the 80s? A decade of big hair, neon colors, and awesome music. It was a time when life was simpler, yet so much more exciting. Imagine a world without smartphones, tablets, or even personal computers. Kids spent their days watching Saturday morning cartoons, playing outside until the streetlights came on, and listening to mixtapes. From the thrill of opening a new video game to the agony of rewinding a cassette tape, the 80s were a unique and unforgettable time. Let's take a nostalgic journey back to the 80s and relive some of the things that today's generation will never experience. The 1980s were defined by unforgettable moments, and one of the most iconic of those was the VCR. Owning a VCR felt like having a front row seat to endless entertainment, a total game changer for family nights. Heading to the local video store was an event all on its own, a journey through aisles lined with colorful VHS covers that practically screamed to be discovered. The excitement of finding the latest hit movie was unmatched, but if it was sold out, you had to get creative. Sometimes that meant picking a random title, but more often than not, you'd find yourself unexpectedly hooked on a hidden gem. One of those movies you'd never heard of, but couldn't stop talking about for weeks. And let's not forget how VCRs changed TV forever. Suddenly, you weren't glued to the couch waiting for your favorite show to air. With a quick timer set up, you could record anything and watch it whenever you wanted. People started building mini-movie collections with blank VHS tapes, recording everything from blockbuster hits to late-night reruns. Stacks of those tapes, complete with handwritten labels, became a proud part of every living room. The VCR wasn't just a cool gadget. It gave us control over what we watched, and it made every night feel like a blockbuster night. And then came MTV. If cable TV was a game changer, MTV was the MVP. Music videos all day, every day. It was like nothing we'd ever seen before. It didn't just change how we listened to music, it made it visual, exciting, and unforgettable. Every song had a story, a look, and a vibe, and we were hooked. MTV wasn't just about music, it was a style factory. The neon colors, teased-up hair, outrageous outfits, it all screamed the 1980s. Sure, most of us wouldn't dream of wearing that stuff, but that's what made it so fun to watch. It was over the top, larger than life, and pure entertainment. The 80s weren't about playing it safe. They were about bold moves and big statements, and MTV led the way, making sure we'd never forget that era. Back in the day, having a paper route was the ultimate gig for kids. Everyone got the daily newspaper delivered to their doorstep, so with a bike and some ambition, it was a great opportunity. It wasn't just about earning a little extra cash. It felt like a badge of honor. Every morning, rain or shine, the route was tackled by loading up a bag with papers, hopping on a bike, and cruising through the neighborhood, tossing papers onto porches like a pro. There was even a weird kind of thrill in nailing the perfect throw or getting a friendly wave from a neighbor. For many, it marked the first taste of responsibility and freedom. Unfortunately, those glory days are pretty much gone. Most newspapers have either gone digital or shut down entirely, and the few that are left don't have nearly as many subscribers. Plus, the ones still reading the physical paper are usually spread too far apart for bike deliveries to make sense. These days, paper routes have been replaced by adults in cars zipping around before sunrise. It's kind of sad to think about, really. What used to be a rite of passage for so many kids is now just another nostalgic memory of a simpler time. Kids today might think it would be super boring without texting or snapping with friends all day, but trust me, it was anything but. Back then, hanging out with friends was all about getting outside and being in the moment. One would hop on a bike, or just walk over to a buddy's house and knock on the door to see if they could come out and play. If they weren't outside, a yard full of bikes was often spotted because that's where everyone would be, hanging out inside, playing games, talking, or just goofing off. And you know what? That was perfectly fine. Parents didn't stress out about things like they do now. As long as kids were with friends, things were pretty much good to go. There was a sense of freedom, like the whole neighborhood was a playground. And honestly, that's what made it so great. Kids were safe and free to roam without being glued to a screen or checking notifications every 5 minutes. It was just about being with friends, laughing, and making memories in the real world, not the digital one. There's something special about those old-school hangouts that today's kids might never fully understand. In school, kids had their own version of texting, passing notes in class. It was the 80s way to stay in the loop and chat with friends without saying a word. The notes were full of all sorts of things. What's up? Do you think he likes me? Or even some silly doodles. But here's the kicker. Passing notes wasn't just about the message. It was about the thrill. You had to be sneaky, quick, and play it cool to avoid getting caught. You'd slip that note across the desk, hoping the teacher wouldn't see the secret exchange happening right under their nose. But if you did get caught, oh boy, the teacher would snatch it right up, sometimes even reading it out loud to the entire class. Imagine your heart sinking as they start reading a note full of crush confessions or inside jokes. That was the stuff of nightmares. It was totally embarrassing, but somehow it made the whole note-passing experience even more exciting. Kids today will never fully get it, the mix of risk, thrill, and maybe a little humiliation that came with sending notes. It was a secret communication game like no other. Kids back then absolutely loved talking to friends on the telephone, the old-school landline ones with cords that were basically their own little toys. Those cords were perfect for twirling around your finger, tying in knots, or, if it was long enough, using as a jump rope. It wasn't just about the conversation, it was about having fun with the phone itself. Some lucky kids had super long cords so they could take the call into another room and have a private chat away from everyone. And if you had your very own phone in your room, that was a total game changer. It was like having your own personal hotline to the world. No more fighting with your siblings over who gets to use the family phone. Plus, if you had one of those cool, trendy phones, maybe a funky design or a color that screamed style, you were the absolute envy of your friends. You'd show it off and feel like a total boss. The phone wasn't just for talking. It was a status symbol, a way to flex and make sure everyone knew you were in the know. It wasn't just about calling friends. It was about owning the coolest gadget on the block. Outdoor playtime back then was like a mini vacation for parents. Finally, some peace and quiet. Once the kids were outside, it was like they'd disappeared into their own world. They'd hop on their bikes and ride around the neighborhood, and you wouldn't see them again until the street lights flickered on in the evening. Parents had no clue where their kids were all day, but honestly, that was perfectly fine. There were no phones to track them, no constant checking in, just pure freedom. As long as they came back before dark, everything was good. It was a simpler time, with kids free to roam, get into adventures, and just enjoy being kids, while parents got a little breather. Speaking of being outside, kids back in the day didn't mess around when it came to bike rides. They were cruising without helmets, knee pads or elbow pads, and they didn't care one bit. It wasn't just about cruising around. They were jumping off gnarly ramps, taking risks, and seeing how far they could push it. Sure, most of the time they'd come home with a few bumps and bruises, but every now and then it meant broken bones or stitches. And you know what? They didn't back down. 80s kids were fearless. They lived for that adrenaline and loved a good challenge. It's honestly kind of a miracle most of them survived all the crazy stunts. But that was the fun of it, right? pushing limits, embracing the danger, and living life on the edge. One day, people will look back and think, wow, that was wild. But honestly, it'll never compare to what 80s kids and earlier generations went through. Take school buses, for example. Back then, kids would literally fight over who got to sit in the very back. That spot was like the VIP section, a full-on thrill ride every day. Every time the bus hit a bump, you'd go flying into the air like you were on a roller coaster. It didn't matter how much you braced yourself, up you went. Those bus rides were pure chaos and excitement, and honestly, that was the best part. But here's the kicker. Kids won't even know what that was like. They won't experience the madness of bouncing around in the back of the bus, and it'll just be a story. Times have changed, but those crazy moments, they're unforgettable and part of what made growing up back then so much fun. 80s kids had some iconic game systems like the Atari 2600 and the Nintendo Entertainment System, but the experience was far different from today's constant screen time. There was no online gaming. If the goal was to play together, it meant actually going to a friend's house. Grab a controller, hop on a bike, and make the trek to the neighborhood buddy's place. This face-to-face interaction made gaming a social event, with friendly rivalry and competitive banter filling the room. Gaming wasn't just about beating levels. It was about laughing with friends, arguing over high scores, and creating memories that went far beyond the screen. It was pure, in-the-moment fun, a shared experience that today's kids might never fully understand. And let's not forget about arcades. The newest and most exciting games weren't found on consoles, they were in arcades. That's where most kids spent their time, feeding quarters into machines, trying to beat their friends' high scores, and soaking up the buzzing, flashing energy of the place. The arcade was like a playground for gamers, where you could team up with friends, make new ones, and enjoy the rush of playing in a packed, high-energy spot. It was an entirely different vibe from today's solo gaming sessions, and that's what made it so memorable. Social media as we know it didn't exist in the 80s, but that didn't stop kids from socializing. Sure, arcades were a popular hangout spot, but the mall, that was the real hotspot on Friday and Saturday nights. Kids would flock there, ready to spend hours having fun with friends. Whether it was grabbing a bite at the food court, playing games in the arcade, or just hanging out and people watching, the mall was the place to be. In many ways, malls were the 80s version of social media, giving kids endless ways to connect. It wasn't just about shopping, it was about being seen and experiencing the energy of the crowd. You'd meet up with your crew, make new friends, and sometimes just wander around looking for something exciting to do. It was cheap entertainment, but it felt like the world. You'd show off your new clothes, chat with friends, and catch up on the latest gossip, all without needing Wi-Fi. The mall was a vibrant social scene, full of life and possibility, long before smartphones and Instagram made socializing a digital experience. For older kids who could drive, socializing took on a whole new vibe. They'd cruise around town, pull into parking lots, and just hang out with friends. It was like real-life social media. No screens, no texting, just hanging face-to-face. You'd roll up, park, and see who else was there, blasting music and chatting about whatever was going on. It was simple, but it was everything. Hard to believe, right? The last part of the 80s was 35 years ago, and kids today just can't fully wrap their heads around how things used to be. It's a whole new era now, and while those old-school hangouts might seem outdated, they were where it was at for connecting back in the day. The 80s was one heck of a decade, and its vibe is still hanging around today. Mullets are making a comeback. Air Jordans are still the ultimate sneaker flex, and it feels like a lot of today's styles are taking cues from that neon-drenched era. But there are a few things from back then that haven't quite come back. Where are the Jordache jeans, those wild parachute pants, or that huge teased-up hair on girls. It's like they disappeared overnight. But hey, that's the thing with fashion. Everything old becomes new again, right? Maybe one day we'll see Jordache jeans and parachute pants back on store racks, and people will be like, fashion's all about cycles, and who knows, maybe we're just a few years away from a full-on 80s revival. Until then, we'll keep rocking the things that made a comeback and wait for the next big throwback to hit. Back in the 80s, before the luxury of downloading ringtones or streaming music on platforms like LimeWire, kids had to get really creative to hear their favorite songs. The go-to move? Calling in requests to radio stations and hoping the DJ would play the track everyone was dying to hear. If someone was lucky enough to get through, there was the need to be ready with a boombox or cassette recorder, hoping not to miss the start of the song or, worse, that the DJ wouldn't ruin it by talking over the intro. It was an art form, honestly. Hours were spent waiting by the phone, dialing the station's request line, hoping to actually get on the air. Even if the song was played, there was no guarantee it wouldn't be cut off early or plagued by weird static. But when that song finally played, it was a win. That mixtape wasn't just a random playlist. It was a collection of hard-won, perfectly captured tracks that felt personal. Today's kids can stream whatever they want at the touch of a button, but they'll never know the thrill of waiting for that perfect song to drop. The struggle might seem old school now, but for 80s kids, it made those mixtapes feel like real treasure. And that's a wrap on our wild ride through the 80s. It was truly a time like no other, filled with memories, moments and experiences that will never be quite the same again. Sure, things have changed, but there's no denying that the 80s had a vibe that still lives on today. From MTV to arcade games, neon colors to good old-fashioned paper routes, that era gave us some seriously unforgettable moments. If you loved this trip down memory lane, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. What's your favorite 80s memory? Let's chat about it. Was there something you totally missed from that time? Or maybe you've got a question about all the cool stuff we talked about. Leave your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay rad.